Hello YouTube, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing a show review. So today we're looking at Kamen Rider Black Sun. It's a tokusatsu streaming series. It's available on Amazon, and it has English subtitles. It might have an English dub, I don't know. It has a lot of different subtitles though. And this reboots or slash reinvigorates the Kamen Rider Black series. So it's also a double anniversary. It's the 35th anniversary for Kamen Rider Black. It's also the 50th anniversary for Kamen Rider the franchise, and it's a pretty big deal, right? So this released October 28th, 2022. It streamed 10 episodes, and well, it seemed to have been a big hit with the community, but that's basically based mostly on the few videos that I've seen, because my experience with tokusatsu is pretty minimal. I watched a lot of Power Rangers growing up. I think the last Power Rangers season I ever watched was Power Rangers RPM, probably. No, actually, I did watch a little bit of Dino Charger, but I watched that as an adult on Netflix a few years ago. And I watched every season up to RPM. I don't think I ever finished RPM, because at that point I was like, okay, this is weird. I do remember watching a little bit of Kamen Rider Ryuki, I think, when I was in Mexico in the 2010 era-ish, kind of. And then my most recent exposure to Kamen Rider and tokusatsu in general was Shin Godzilla a few weeks ago. Then Kamen Rider Kuga the manga, which I want to continue, but I'm not going to until Titan Comics fixes its problems with its machine translation and really shitty way of interacting with its customers. My roommate got me Kamen Rider the Classic Collection. What else? There was something else that I did with Kamen Rider. I don't know. I guess that's it. So my experience with Kamen Rider and with tokusatsu was pretty minimal, beyond what would be generally expected of like an American 20-something-year-old, which is mostly just Power Rangers, right? So yeah, and so technically speaking, Kamen Rider Black Sun is my first Kamen Rider series ever, and it was badass. I really enjoyed it. I would give this an 8 out of 10, more or less. It was pretty great, and I am now properly a tokusatsu fan. I am very interested in watching basically everything that's in the Tokusatsu website. Any Kamen Rider stuff on there, plus all of the Ultraman stuff, and maybe some of the movies that they have. I'm all for watching all of that stuff. I definitely want to watch Kamen Rider Amazons, the other series that's available on Amazon for Kamen Rider. I want to check out Garo. There's a lot of things that I want to check out now that I've gotten into tokusatsu. Now that I've consumed a bit of tokusatsu content on YouTube, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, now let's properly talk about Kamen Rider Black Sun. So the directors here are Kazuya Shiraishi, Shinji Higuchi, who I think worked with Hideaki Anno on Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, and Shin Kamen Rider, and Kiyotaka Taguchi, who I think was an old hand at doing Kamen Rider stuff. It was produced by a trio of people, and the writer here was Izumi Takahashi, and the music was done by Kenta Matsukuma. And I actually really enjoyed the music. I wouldn't necessarily say all of it was memorable, but the Shadow Moon theme, the Black Sun theme, and the little piano violin stinger that signified, hey, Black Sun's about to do something cool, was great. I really enjoyed all of the music there, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I remember all of the different tracks and all the different moments that music played on, right? So yeah, and then there was 3 major companies associated with this production. So first of all, Toei, then Amazon, and then this other company called Pony Canyon, and I'm guessing that they were the CGI guys for all of the CGI necessary for this series. Now, basically, I don't think you need to know anything about Kamen Rider, because I certainly didn't, and I basically more or less understood everything about the story. But you're going to have to be patient, because a lot of things about the characters don't really make too much sense until the end of the story. And even then, I feel like there's a lot of gaps in the storytelling that could have been fixed and kind of made it better. But, I feel like that about a lot of Japanese media, so it is what it is. It's just kind of how it goes, right? So, yeah. Basically, this story deals with a human versus non-human conflict between these two races. First of all, humans, and the other race is these non-human / human animal human kind of thing hybrids called kaijin. And so it's kind of interesting because you wouldn't really necessarily call Japan a very tolerant country, but this story really focuses on the fact that, hey, Japanese people are really shitty to these creatures that are also Japanese, that don't really have any major differences from humans beyond the physical, and they got to deal with this, right? And so we have this conflict that exists on Earth. It's mostly centered on Japan, although there are kaijin that live outside of Japan. And I would assume that they also look Japanese the same way all the kaijin in Japan look. And they face very harsh discrimination. There's two plot lines. There's one in 1972, and there's one in the present day. 1972 one was good, but I generally feel that it would have been better if the story was told properly in chronological order, and then flashbacks were used to highlight events that we already saw, like later on in the series, for emotional punches. Or that they would have just not done that, and they would have just retold the story in a different way. Like, when the main character meets the young character and he has to tell her his life story because they need to know, then you jump into a major flashback that lasts an episode or two, and then you come back to the world in the current time period, and then you continue on with the story. Like, just the way that they used the two storylines didn't work for me. There could have been a better way of organizing it, right? So, yeah. They face this harsh discrimination. They have this government support on the surface, but it turns out that behind the scenes, the government is actually a key player in this horrible situation that these kaijin find themselves in, right? And it focuses on a few different people. First of all, focuses on the prime minister, the kaijin party called Gorgum, who work with the prime minister, and then a girl that's an activist called Aoi, as Izumi, I think is her name, and then two specific characters that used to be part of Gorgum that are now not part of it, and these would be Kotaro, or Black Sun, and Nobuhiko, or Shadow Moon. And these two guys happen to be potential creation kings, or potential, basically, kaijin god, people, and it's pretty interesting. First of all, who the creation king is and why they're important isn't really clear, beyond the fact that it's said that kaijin look at this guy as a god. Why? We don't know. The only thing we know is that the creation king is not a normal kaijin. He looks like a very specific kind of locust or cricket type monster. He's huge, and he has this thing coming out of him called heaven, which is used for kaijin, by kaijin to enhance their abilities, and also used to create human hybrids of kaijin. So basically, you make more kaijin, or you strengthen kaijin with the goo that comes out of this guy, right? And Black Sun and Shadow Moon are Kotaro and Nobuhiko. These kids used to be very good friends. They joined Gorgum when they were young in the 1970s. And then they became disillusioned with the way Gorgum worked. And so Kotaro went his own separate way, and Nobuhiko was put in a prison for 50 years. And so the story starts with Nobuhiko basically being allowed to escape, or managing to escape, in order to change the world in his way, right? So, yeah, there's a bunch of secondary characters like Aoi and Shunsuke and Nick and Komori, Kujira and Nomi, and they're all basically allies. And then the enemies are the major players at Gorgum, who are Donami, Doram, Bishum, Baram, and Bilgania. And I think Doram is actually... Donami is the prime minister. And it's really... I don't know, it's just really complex. It's like really weird. So the problem, or the great part about this story, is that the action, when it happens, is really great. The storytelling is generally really good. It is a slow building series, but it is compelling enough to make you interested in it. So I really liked it. So those two things combined, plus the really awesome character design and suit design for the monsters, made it so it was a very enjoyable experience. There's also a lot of gore, which also made it a fun experience. So that's why it gets an 8 out of 10. The reason why it loses out on 2 points from being a 10 out of 10 is because the world building isn't really sensical. Like, I think it makes sense if you've watched Kamen Rider before, but since this is a brand new story, it shouldn't rely on that. So even though you don't need to, it makes sense for you to have a little bit of Kamen Rider knowledge if you're not going to be patient enough to wait for the whole situation to resolve itself. Even if it is resolved by the end of the series, it's still not clear who is the Creation King and stuff like that. That is told to you in the story, but it doesn't make sense. Like, these kaijin don't really make too much sense, because there's a group of them that have non-Japanese names that are clearly based on very ancient animals, like a pterodactyl and a saber-toothed tiger and this ancient like spider thing and this like fish. And they have non-Japanese names. So it would make sense for them to be naturally occurring kaijin that have lived for a long time. If the Creation King is their god, it would make sense for him to also be a natural thing that humans then found and then used in their experiments to create new kaijin for whatever it is that they wanted to do. I think they wanted to have like a military force, kind of like Weapon X. But that's not how the story is told to you. And it basically is like a Weapon X program in the middle of World War II in order for Japan to have a better kind of military force that then gets swept under the rug, and now kaijin are used for other purposes. But ultimately, they do want to use them for that as well at some point. They just need to get around to doing it in a different way, right? So the world building for that doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is that Kotaro and Nobuhiko are apparently these other possible Creation Kings because of when they were born. That's fine. That doesn't explain anything about why they're such high-level kaijin, compared to literally everyone else. Why they have Japanese names where every other massive kaijin character has non-Japanese names. Why they look almost exactly the same as a Creation King, and why they have their special belts. Like, these things just naturally appear, and it doesn't make any sense because no one else has them except for Aoi, and she also doesn't make any sense as to why she has it. Like, it's weird. It doesn't work for me. And so I think that, generally speaking, the issue was that the world building was unclear and not well thought out. Now, maybe for Japanese audiences this doesn't matter, but from an American perspective, that's like usually what most people complain about in the US when it comes to entertainment, right? Like, why is it not logically making sense? And so I feel like maybe it's not a fair criticism, but it's the major criticism I have, because it doesn't I can't have this awesome like superhero show if I don't understand where all of the elements that make the superhero, in this case the Kamen Rider, come from, right? So I feel like the lack of explanation really makes it detrimental to my enjoyment, and so that's why it loses 2 points from being a 10 out of 10, right? So yeah, the ending is also pretty garbage. I understand the point of it. Like, it's supposed to be this kind of circular thing, right? Like, there's this harshness, there's this horrible discrimination, there is work to be done about it, but it ends up with only lessening this discrimination minimally, and then there's a new fight for it. This one also doesn't work, and so now we end up at the very start of it again, so that we can have a new series, a new focus later on, because the ending is basically bait for a second season. But it doesn't work for me, because what was the whole fucking point of it then? Does that make sense? I don't know. Generally speaking, I had a great time with the show, but the ending really sours my experience, because there was better ways to make this a season 2, right? It wasn't set up in a good way to have this kind of this passing of the baton, or this passing of the mask, or whatever, that basically happens at the end of the story, because there was only 10 episodes of story. This is not a continuation of Kamen Rider and Kamen Rider Black and Kamen Rider Black RX. This is a new version of that story, right? So it doesn't work for me because essentially this story is basically like the Logan movie. It's this kind of like reintroduction to this old hero as he finds himself again through the eyes of this young character that changes his perspective. And then at the end of it, there's this like passing on of the torch where the new character, the younger character, takes on the dream or the purpose of their older character, right? Like X-23 sees Logan take sacrifice his life for her, so she now becomes Wolverine, the same way that Kotaro ends up where he is. And so Aoi then creates this new like task force group of like terrorist kids, right? But the Logan movie is like 20 years in the making, right? It doesn't work the same way for this Kamen Rider show. Now, of course, it doesn't make sense to compare them like that, but generally speaking, they are kind of the same style of story. And so this shitty ending plus the lack of world building or clear and well-told world building doesn't really work for me. And that's why it's not that great. But beyond that, all of the enjoyment I got out of it was so high that I'm willing to overlook this for the sake of like being a tokusatsu fan. Like I really liked my time with this show. Generally speaking, it was really great. But there are major complaints I have about it. So yeah. Other things that are not really complaints or negatives, they're just kind of things I noticed. There's an interesting choice to include 2 or 3 black characters. Like, there were American characters that went to Japan, got involved in this thing, and then became part of the cast. I don't understand what the point of that was, because it's not like my vision of Japan is that they're not really interested in the outside world. They're very much like for themselves, right? And this might not be the case, but it's just kind of how it seems to me. Like, unless there's money involved, I don't think they give a shit, which I guess is how most countries feel. And I'm not sure what the point of these black characters, like these American characters that were introduced was. Like, and it's because as an American, I see harsh discrimination, I see the 70s, I see a black dude, I think, oh, civil rights movement. But it doesn't correlate to what the kaijin are facing at this time, because yes, they're facing harsh discrimination, but they're not really like rebelling the same way the civil rights movement worked. They were actually more like just like trying to do something, almost kind of like a terrorist kind of attack, and then they get embroiled with the prime minister's son, and then they have an infight that then causes them to get disrupted, and then the prime minister takes them in and like changes their mind and makes them work for him instead of like fight against him, right? That's not really like a civil rights movement thing. That's more of a like they got bamboozled kind of thing, and it doesn't really work for me to have that there. So like these 2 characters, Oliver and Nick, just end up like not being meaningful at all. And like I don't know, like I don't have a problem with them being there, nor do I have a problem with them not being there. I just didn't understand the point of them, because it feels like they were trying to connect it to the civil rights movement, and I think he even says something like that. Oliver says something like that, but at the same time, I don't know if that's really gonna work for Japan at all. Like, do Japanese people even care about that stuff or even know about that stuff? Like, how much understanding of American politics and American political situations does the average Japanese, tokusatsu fan have? Like, I just don't see it, right? Not that I have all that much understanding of, like, any of that, right? But, like, I don't know if that made sense. It's just, like, what was the point of it? And why was it added in? And honestly, the problem is that it just wasn't utilized correctly. Like, if the point was to connect it to this other massive, discrimination problem, maybe Oliver should have been a more important character instead of this kind of random, like, exposition character in the middle of episode 7 or whatever. but maybe that's just me. I don't know. It was a little odd to me, right? So yeah, that's really all there is to it. Like I said, I loved this show. I am a Tokusatsu fan for sure now. It might be a little bit hard for me to get into it, actually, because this is probably like the pinnacle. And then going back to something more generic or more kind of like less, that has less money attached to it, might kind of suck. But I'm very excited about my new journey into Tokusatsu, and hopefully I have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, eventually I'll do more reviews for other Tokusatsu shows on the channel, other Tokusatsu movies as well. So look forward to those, and let me know what you guys thought about Kamen Rider Black Sun if you've watched it. And if you haven't watched it and you decided to watch my spoiler review for some reason, let me know what you thought about what I said. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.